Hello, I'm Ross Andersen, Deputy Editor here at The Atlantic. Thank you for joining us today for the second in our new digital event series, The Big Story. We are grateful that readers have been turning to The Atlantic in unprecedented numbers for our coverage of the coronavirus and much more. Our goal for this virtual series is to go behind the scenes with our writers into their very homes, in fact, to take you deeper into their thinking. Before we dive in, I want to remind you that we want viewers to be part of the conversation. You can do that by typing your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of the screen, and I will try to incorporate them into the discussion. Please keep your questions as short and on topic as possible, and be sure to tell us where you're calling in from. Now let's bring in Caitlin Flanagan, staff writer at The Atlantic, who recently wrote a very moving and powerful piece about what it has been like to live with stage 4 cancer during a pandemic. Caitlin, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to jump right in by asking about your quarantine experience. This whole thing has been a challenge for everyone, but a lot of us are just kind of making cocktails and tending to our lockdown beards. Whereas you are navigating treatment for this very serious disease. I was hoping how you could sort of tell us how you're holding up and what an average day looks like for you and what an average trip to the doctor looks like.
Oh, those are good questions. Well, I think most of the time I'm having the same sort of pandemic experience as I call us laptop jockeys, people who can still do their work, albeit maybe not as easily, or we have to do it in a different way, but we're still employed and we still, so I always look at the New York Times and notice that they're doing this excellent job of covering all the inequities that are being revealed and really focusing in on people who are deeply, deeply harmed by this. But then every single other article is about cook these wonderful mussels, watch this divine movie about a period piece about England between the wars. And I always think, boy, they really know their customers well. Like, it's message we care, but what are we going to cook tonight from this arsenal of recipes? So I'm just working as usual, but going to get treatment or this whole kind of range of things that I have to do, which aren't actually treatment, but are more sort of tests and evaluations. It's a new world. I guess it's the new reality for everybody. I had to go. One of the medications sometimes damages my heart, and it looked like it had really really damaged it more than ever. So I had to go get another test at the cardiologist. And it was really, I just compared it to Checkpoint Charlie, or, when East Germany, people trying to get out of there, there were these huge, just in this hallway, I've walked down, 100 times, these huge red stop signs: stop, don't go any farther, wait here, 6 feet apart. Then you finally got to come forward and sort of answer all the questions. And they have a lot of cancer patients, and it's hard because cancer patients for other reasons will have yeses to the questions. Like, yes, they have a cough, or yes, they are, a lot of those symptoms come from treatment. So it's a complicated thing. I don't have those symptoms now from treatment. And finally, the temperature's taken, and then you don't sit in a waiting room. You go right into the examining, or in my case, into the testing room, and then straight into the doctor's office. So I'm amazed at how quickly, much as I'm disturbed by all the public health failures, there's just this infrastructure of such excellent medicine in America that just on the fly, they could figure out these systems so quickly. They're ad hoc. They haven't got training for them, but they're just, and they now all, I notice everybody has the PPE that they need at Santa Monica Hospital, which wasn't true UCLA Santa Monica. So, and then getting treatment itself, which isn't chemo now, it's like monoclonal antibodies of Herceptin and other medications. It's a little odd because you go through that gauntlet and then you go into the treatment room, and that a lot of your fellow patients are very immune suppressed because they're on heavy chemos. So it's a little, you just sort of say, oh, it's a little scary to be in this environment, but but that's what it's like. It's just feeling that. But the main thing is, and it has abated a bit, is that I can't, if I catch COVID, it'll kill me because I have lung problems, again, from treatment a long time ago, not from cancer. I have lingering, they're pretty serious lung problem, and it would kill me pretty quickly. So fortunately in LA, we had that bit of time to
Yeah.
adjust and to see what was happening back east, and putting, and the, you know, leaders here put in some really strong social distancing protocols and shutting down the city. A lot of people are saying, as they are everywhere, that can't go on forever. We've got to earn money. We've got to get our businesses back. But right now, LA is able to handle, you know, they only had 48 patients, COVID patients in UCLA hospital last week when I checked. They
Yeah.
make that public information, but that's what my days are like.
Yeah. Does tell me, does it make you, as someone who is so vulnerable to this disease, does it make the non-mask wearer that you might encounter, sort of in a parking lot somewhere or out on the street, uh, seem different to you?
No, I don't mind that at all because I think that um, certainly if there was if everyone was packed together and they weren't in a mask, but
Mhm.
um, you know, I feel it's my responsibility to, when I see somebody coming by without a mask, you know, I'll cross the street, I walk a lot or I bike a lot, and there's no offense taken by it, but I have so many things I could be angry about. I'm not gonna be angry about people for not wearing their masks, you know.
Yeah. Um, Well, look, like many people, I found your piece really, really moving. And as you know, you and I have talked about this. I lost my mom to cancer when I was in my early teens, and
Mm,
a lot of what you wrote really resonated with my family's experience. And one thing in particular was the way you wrote about how you sort of come to see your life as divided cleanly in two periods, sort of before and after the day you were diagnosed. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more here about how your world changed that day.
sure. Well, I was in and you just blew me away yesterday, by the way, when you told me about your mom, and I hope we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Hmm. I
Because I
hope.
saw my sons in you, and I saw, you know,
Hmm.
and I thought about your mom and me, and just this sort of sorority of women who have children, who have this idea in their mind, I cannot die, but we have no control. You know, they're going to give us treatment, and maybe the treatment works, and maybe the treatment fails us and we have to try something else. But as moms, we don't care at all about our life. We
Hmm.
care only about our life as it affects our children, you know, and
Hmm.
to try to give them a mom as long as we can. So I'm already kind of tearing up, but um, I think so. Anyways, I was at kind of the peak of I was just one of these little girls, even though I was not from the 50s, I was born in the 60s, but all I wanted was to be a mom and to have a house. And I had all those, like, this was the era where you would get like a little broom would be a toy, and you're like, awesome, I've got the broom now, and the waistband, like the little like thing you dustpan miniaturized to become a good worker, I guess.
Yeah.
But I really, really, really wanted to have kids. And I always, you know, I babysat a lot. I did everything to be around kids. I was a teacher, you know, of older kids, but still, I always loved that. So I had twins. They were 4 years old. It was just glorious. Um, and then I went to this doctor appointment, fearing nothing, and walked out of there being told I had aggressive breast cancer.
Hmm.
You know, he couldn't confirm. Obviously, he had just sent the biopsy that day, but he's like, it's aggressive. You have breast cancer, it's aggressive. And I just couldn't take it in, like any kind of big piece of news that you can't, like on 9/11, I'm looking at the television, but I can't bring it in for a while. Is this a movie I'm watching? Is this real? And I just knew that everything was going to be different in my life, and most importantly in my kids' life,
Hmm.
and how we were all going to get through this. And I had some very wrong ideas about the best way to get kids through something like this.
Hmm.
But fortunately, again at UCLA, where I wasn't being treated yet, but they had a center anyone can go to, the Sims Mann Center. where you can talk to social workers about, how do I deal with this? I'm so sick now on chemo, and
Yeah.
I have very little kids and they don't understand what's happening. And how do I cope with this? So it was definitely a before and after. And you know how time, I guess pandemic maybe is the analogy, but there are things in your life where you keep waiting for it to go back. This is temporary. But then you realize, no, I'm always going to be somebody that had this happen to her, and then it might happen again, and it's happened again, and then again. So
Hmm.
it was a different life. It is. I look back at those pictures and I do feel sad. Oh, look at me. I really, you think you have cares and worries, but you really don't until you have a big worry or a care. And then I look at those pictures and I feel sad.
You said for a moment that until you talked to social workers at UCLA or whoever, that you had some mistaken notions about how to handle this with your boys. Were you tempted to downplay the seriousness of your diagnosis with them?
Oh, I wanted to hide everything from it. That from them. It just seemed so horrible. And I tried to, I just invented what I thought was a simpler language. Well, I got sick. I had a bump and the doctor took the bump off. And now he's giving this medicine. And can you believe it? This medicine is making my hair, going to make my hair fall out. Isn't that funny? And they were like, it's not funny. Like I had found this book, which was called like, It's Okay If. It didn't have anything to do with cancer. We had the book.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's okay if you're this or you're that. And when it's okay if you're bald. And I'm like, and it's okay if you're bald. And they're looking at it. And that was the moment I decided to tell them I was going to lose my hair.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to get bald.
Yeah.
It's not good. Yeah. Well, you're your mom,
It's great to be.
and it's not a fashion statement.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I went and talked to the social worker about this. And she said, oh, no, you got to tell them the words: cancer, chemo, treatment, tumor. And I'm like, are you kidding? These are my children. I have to protect them, protect them, protect them. And she said, you've told them you're taking a medicine that's going to that's made you lose your hair. The next time they have to take Tylenol, they're going to be frightened. You told them that you're sick. Well, the next time they hear they're sick, they're going to think, oh my God, am I going to be like mom is? She said, you got to teach them these words. And so they have a vocabulary. And she got me this children's book about, Tim's mommy has breast cancer. And I was like, are you kidding? And it used the real words. And I was like, all right. I thought my instinct said she's totally wrong. And I brought the book home and my kids just like they leaned into it, because here was the information. Here's a character in a book, a little boy character, and his mom has this thing, and his mom's in a headscarf. So I'm not out in planet, Zondron where nobody's been before.
Yeah.
This explains it. And then my little boy Patrick, he took the book in his hand and he ran out the front door and he ran to our neighbor, to Linda's house, who's an adult, and he's like, this is it. This is it. And she read it to him. And then he took it to Robin's house, my other friend Robin, in the next house. And it just taught me that telling the truth, because kids know something big is going through the house. Something big is going on with mom. Mom's the center of the universe. And so that was how I sort of learned a big lesson about that. But I was hoping you would talk a little bit, and I'm still so struck by that your mom got cancer first when you were 10, and you felt like you could really as a good 10-year-old. Is that 10-year-old when she first got it, or 12?
Yeah, that's right. I was 9 or 10, and yeah, it's funny. I don't remember the initial diagnosis being particularly traumatic. I remember there being a sort of spirit of kind of adventure and everyone in it together, and that we did various races for the cure, and kind of sprang into action in various community service ways, and then when it went into remission, it was this kind of this victory, this triumph that lent our family this sort of sense of character, and a kind of deeper narrative, we felt than sort of people in the outside world. And but then recurrence came, and not to shift
When
myself.
you were 14, right? You were
A
14
little
whenever she
before
was?
that, yeah, I was 13, and it moved really fast. Unfortunately,
Mm,
it was inside of a year before she died.
mm,
But I wonder, that second set of conversations. My parents were very upfront with me in the way that you, in the fullness of time, were with your children.
they were, okay.
And the second set of conversations had sort of obviously a darker tint to them. And I wondered, your narrative, thankfully and hopefully far into the future, has a different arc. But I wonder, how is the texture of the conversations with your boys different as they got older?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, my hair, so they were just finishing preschool when I got the first blast of it, and then they were in kindergarten. And by first grade, my hair is growing back, second grade, and they were so young when it started, and they would hear me talk about it because I always talk openly about it to people. But they sort of just, to them at that point, it was like some interesting factoid about our family. Like we'd been on a trip somewhere, an excursion. I mean, deep inside, I think they took it in all sorts of ways that I probably missed. But when it was a recurrence, um, oh,
Yeah.
Ooh. And I was so frightened because it was metastatic then. It was in my lungs and in my liver. And when you're in cancer, you're just always like, keep me out of that category. Mets, they call it metastatic. She's got Mets. And so it was in these areas. And again, we talked to them in a overly positive but truthful way. We didn't go into now metastatic, and we didn't talk about odds or anything like that, obviously. And we said, no more surgery, no more radiation. It'll be this, another chemo.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. So they're 10 now. They're like the age you were at the initial. And just to show the way kids process things when you don't even realize it. So one of my boys, Connor, was really an outdoors kid at that time. And we decided we'll send him to this camp for 2 weeks, even though he was just 10. And he loved the camp and they loved him. And he would like always forget everything for the overnight. They're like, your kid has such heart. Like he just lies down in the dirt and sleeps. I'm like, yeah, that's nothing would happen at my house. But anyways, he came back and, his for this summer that I'd been on treatment, and his camp duffel was just full of dirty stuff and he's taking it all out. And he goes, oh, Mom, I made you this. So I brought it here. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. What is it? And he goes, it's a medicine bag.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Mm.
And I'm sure there were just different kind of Native American things. There was a program there that you could learn to make, and that he had chosen, I'm going to make my mom this medicine bag. And it's like, oh, these kids,
Yeah.
they are just, the only thing I always tell parents is kids know everything. You can give them a language for it or you can't, but there are no secrets from the kids,
Yeah. I want to bring it back to the pandemic for a second.
Pandemic. Okay.
Yeah, keep us both out of crying range.
Mhm.
You've well, the mail just arrived since we're
Good.
you've now spent 17 years really wrestling with this very serious disease. And I wondered if that gives you a different perspective, or even maybe
Oh,
a clean,
yes.
like, does that give you a cleaner burning anger about the way President Trump has been so careless when he discusses the coronavirus?
Yeah. I mean, more than anyone that for a woman to live 17 years with a super aggressive breast cancer is a particular strain of it. It is the result not of my being a good person. I'm not, it's not because I prayed the right prayers. It's not because, none of those things hurt. I should be a nicer person and I do pray, but scientists just spent day after day after day after day in labs working on this, tissue sample after tissue sample after tissue sample, and going, you know what, this one category, of tissue samples is really responding to this one drug, this one, element, Herceptin. And just, it's kind of a famous story, Dennis Lehman, who invented it. So it was like all of this science, which
Mm,
might seem abstract to the layperson or someone who's not scientific at all. And I'm not, but it resulted in a woman still alive 17 years later. I'm on a lot of treatment, but I'm living my life for sure. And then to have something like a virus come in and not to get correct to see the president of the United States just saying, well, disinfectant or putting a bright light or sort of spitballing ideas. Or I was watching that day when he said, we're going to have a vaccine very, very soon, matter of weeks or something. And I was thinking to myself, boy, I'm really used to hearing about drugs going through a phase 1 trial, a phase 2, and
mhm.
talking to women who are in really serious situations and they're trying to get in on a trial and they don't know. It just, it stunned me. And it also has frightened me a bit in that, even though I've seen a lot of things Trump has done, his character and nature, I very much dislike. But
Mhm.
that's just a matter of taste, I guess, is that level of it, or personal feeling. But I've seen him do things that seemed really dangerous and wrong for the country before. But I still thought, this is where I'm such a sucker. I still thought, well, with the pandemic, he's going to be that this will force him to be honest, and
Yeah.
this will force him to talk plainly to us. And I really think Obama would have been magnificent. I know a lot of people don't like Obama. I very much did, and do, but I think this is something that he would have been magnificent at, because it's
Mhm.
a level of cerebral, scientific, abstract knowledge that has to be translated to millions of people. And also to have a leader, Obama was just great at,
Mhm.
when he went to give a talk of any kind, you're like, oh, sounds like this guy's, he's got that under control and then some. And with Trump, it's just like a wildfire every day, every conference. And I know people died because of his casual attitude.
Mhm.
Because if I'd been back east, I would have been like, oh, yeah, this is just a virus. It's the flu. I wouldn't have let it stop me from doing anything. And I would have probably caught it and be in a terrible situation. I'm so far away. And in LA, we were able to kind of get ahead of it.
Mhm.
But, I'm sure that people's family members died because of this. I'm sure there are people who were going to take a relative out of, or a parent out of assisted living and come to bring home where they can look after them. And then before they know it, it's closed down and everybody's circulating COVID in that facility and you can't visit your relative. It's, I think that there's some deaths that he's kind of very intimately connected to, of just ordinary American citizens or people who live here.
Yeah, it's funny, speaking of feeling like a sucker, I know for myself, it's not that I expected Trump to rise to this particular occasion, but even after the election and even after reading sort of in our magazine about all the various ways that he's hollowed out the government, I still had
Mhm.
this kind of background faith in America as sort of the world's grown-ups. And so it's been disillusioning to see for kind of the first time in my life that no one overseas is even paying lip service to the notion that we are playing some kind of leadership role in this crisis. And I wondered, I hope you don't mind me saying, who has a longer perspective on this than I do, how this makes you feel differently about America itself.
Well, I'm not as dire as some people yet, again, because I'm a sucker. Um, but I didn't grow up, my parents were American. They were not people who loved America very much. I grew up when, Nixon was having that campaign of, bombing, these citizens and sending, my parents were leftists and were very involved in helping people to dodge the draft, young men in Berkeley. So I know, you look at the whole, history of things, people kind of hid things, terrible things that they did. But
Mhm.
I don't see America always as a shining city on a hill.
Sure.
But I do believe that our foundation, more than having public health and more than having a State Department and more than having a president, our foundational documents, our Declaration, the Constitution, and then the Gettysburg Address as a check back on the Declaration. These are the most glorious documents ever created, and that's what will always get us through. And things may fail, public health may fail, but what America is in those documents. And I think our boss Jeff Goldberg read that whole thing about the Obama doctrine, and I think that we're getting the idea is to get more and more perfect, and to find those documents to be more and more taking all people into consideration. But so I'm not down on America. I just think we're we're in a bad phase. We have a bad boyfriend. He's not even that. He's like your mom's scary new boyfriend, and Joe Biden is her sensible second husband who say, hey, I'll come by, I'll check on you and the kids.
You should write that.
It's a very familial situation here. And Joe Biden is I should say nothing bad. I don't know, maybe.
No, let it rip. It's a pandemic.
Well, it's just with Joe Biden at my age and 57, the analogy I always make is there are all these people my age, and they get back on Facebook, they find their high school boyfriend or girlfriend, and they get married, and their life finally is complete. And I feel like I've had the opposite experience with Joe Biden, because he's always been in my life. When I was a very young teacher, he was running for president he was a Democrat running for president. Let me learn about him. Immediately, it turns out that he's plagiarized many speeches and is kind of a buffoon-like plagiarizer of well-known speeches. So he has to drop out. Oh, okay, can happen. Then a couple of years later, Anita Hill. And it's who's this son of a bitch that's letting it's that same guy with the plagiarism? Why is he running this hearing? And then he comes back running for president. It's he's super good at, I don't know, Joe Biden. It's just he's super good at losing. That's what I'm trying to say. He's a phenomenally good, and I think that all I hear from everybody who knows much more than I, it doesn't matter, Trump hatred will win the day. And it's that's what we were told during Hillary, and she came out of the same machine. And now it's only the occult can explain this. We're in an existential crisis. We have got to search the entire land, shake the trees, people we've never heard about, and we get Joe Biden. How do you, I don't understand it. And I've got to fall in love with Joe Biden. And I'm trying, and I will. And I won't speak honestly anymore about him soon, because I've got to fall in love. Because everyone says hate is enough to change an election.
Yeah.
And there's a comedian, I wish I remembered his name, but he has this thing that he always says, that when you're in a relationship, the most important thing is that you love the same things. And if you love the same things, you'll get along forever. And he's no, you got to hate the same things. If you hate, look at that guy in those salmon colored pants, what an asshole, you'll be married forever. And but so a lot of us that we know hate Trump, but that was not enough to win the election. We've got to start loving, we got to spray some catnip on Joe Biden, and we got to start loving him, and it's hard.
Well, I want to shift back to the personal for a second. I was hoping you might dispense some writerly wisdom for our audience. Over the years, I'm going to embarrass you. You've written some of our most deeply reported and even prize-winning investigations. And of course, because of the writer you are, your voice and presence looms large in those stories. But you also have this whole other mode, which we saw in the cancer piece, and which we saw in this stunning essay that you wrote in the run-up to the Kavanaugh hearings, where you are able to write about the personal in this very intimate way. And I was wondering if you'd tell us how you kind of toggle between those modes, even within the same piece sometimes.
Well, it's funny that the one about our boss is texting me as and I don't have my reading glasses on, super boss. So
It's
I
all
mean,
okay.
because I'm on TV here.
I kept checking because I was worried, but we're good. We're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay. It's like all I can see is his name, because that's kind of always seared in your mind, the person who pays you. And then there's like these words, like, what is he saying? So anyways, the Kavanaugh piece, it was bubbling up that there was this woman and she had these allegations, and it was just kind of a political story. And then I was just sitting somewhere on a Sunday, somebody was getting an award, Sandra Singh Low, another Atlantic great writer. I mean, an Atlantic great writer. And I just was scrolling through because other people were getting their things. And I just saw the Washington Post, that story saying that there were notes in the file of the psychiatrist or psychologist that she'd talked to him before, her a long time before. And I just thought, well, then I believe her, because I know so many women who in their history, they have something like that. And it's very small to the guys. It's very, very small. It's like, for those two guys who did that to her, it was 5 minutes of hijinks. We're drunk. We're one-upping each other. This is so crazy. We're grabbing this girl in this bedroom. And maybe he literally doesn't even remember it. I could believe that, because they're drinking and they're going to go out and do a bunch of other crazy things. And to the woman, it's a deep event in her life. And it, and that guy who's trying to email us telling us, I don't know what, said you should write about, and I said, all right. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be that exposed, because I had something like that happen to me, maybe more intense as far as what the guy was able to do when I was very young. And I thought, oh, I guess it's being older and it's having cancer. It's like, why not? That famous thing, yet why not say what happened?
Yeah.
I thought, what am I saving it for? Like, I might as well say it. And then I was asked to go on the Daily at the New York Times. And I was just thinking, oh, I'm going to talk about date rape as a concept and the 80s and this and that and the other thing. And I'd never spoken really in any way about that experience, except to say, oh yeah, date rape. Now I know what that was. And then Michael Barbaro, he was out here and he just asked me the first question and I fell apart. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. There was so much trauma around that tiny little event so long ago that I could barely speak. And so I really look at a lot of things through that lens. For example, I was looking at Joe Biden's accuser yesterday speaking, and she was kind of breaking down in tears. And I think before I'd had that experience speaking to Michael Barbaro, how do you say his last name?
I don't even know.
I don't know. It seems like he says it differently each time just to trick us, but I'll call him Mike then. It wasn't until before, if I had seen her saying those things and crying before I had that experience, I would say, oh, pull it together. No one's that traumatized by something that happened so long ago. And now I'm like, well, I do. Not that I'm saying I believe or disbelieve. I'm just saying I look at that experience of the way a woman tells the story very differently. And that things that, and so I just decided to write it. I just decided, and the same thing with the cancer one, because I really felt like it was going on so long, having the cancer, and it really was affecting me. And when you look at me, because I have my hair and everything, I don't look sick, And so there were lots of times people would say, oh, you should do this. You should, oh, come on, you're going to do it. You're going to just do it. Oh, okay. And I'd be so tired. And I just thought, it's just better that everyone knows what I'm going through. But I was very afraid when it came out, I regretted it hugely. And then by the next day, I was glad that people knew the truth.
Well, sticking with the personal, you write really movingly about your experience of motherhood, and in your latest piece, and as something of a Caitlin Flanagan completionist, it reminded me of this thread that's been running through your tweets lately. And you should correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you've become irritated by the way that motherhood is being valued or devalued by certain segments of our culture. Do I have that right?
Oh, always, always. I've been that way, that there's always this idea now that the home is this, once there's a marriage between two career people, let's say we're on that tiny level right now, but of society, but a very influential segment of society,
Mm.
the children in the home, all it is a fighting ground between the parents as work. Like, who's going to do this work? Who's going to do that work? How many hours did you spend? And then always the women are like, he just didn't clean enough. Well, he didn't clean that much before he married you. He's kind of a slob. You saw his apartment. Why do you think he's going to be different? But anyways, that the children are just work. They're just labor. And in a Marxist sense, the labor must be compensated some way. But the problem is, a mother who's with her child, in any way, it's a profound, unique experience. And a lot of women are discovering it now in ways that men aren't in the same way, as far as just what I read online and newspapers and so forth, kind of realizing, wow, the home, that it's a lot of things. And it's not, I think in our minds now we have this idea, either it's a glorious, beautiful HGTV home where everything's right, or it's a disaster and everyone's miserable. And the truth about home is it's messy. Like, it gets messy emotions come out. But when a woman says, I think it's important for me to be with my children when they're small, and of course it is, and no one will admit it, a baby comes out of the womb looking for someone to bond to deeply. That's how they survive. And I don't think they're really well served by going caregiver to caregiver. Now, there's a million charts and studies to prove they do as well in the world. And I know a lot of them, and they do, and they're very independent. But if you go back to them at 6 months or a year, their need and desire would be to be closely bonded to one person. And I think a lot of women have that desire to have that experience in the early years of their children's lives. But the message from feminism is lean into your job, which means lean away from your children. Be, your job, forget about this, that to really get parity with men, and it's absolutely true, we can't be stepping back from our jobs or planning career tracks that are mommy tracks, or choosing careers like teaching where there's a lot of time off. We can't be doing those things. We have to completely lean into our jobs. And I think the feminist message has continued and continued and continued to say that's better. They give this little talk about, well, everybody should do whatever they want. And if a mom wants to stay home and she can afford it, I'm sure that's another thing we believe in. But then they want to lean in. And here's the other thing. Sheryl Sandberg says, lean in. It's important for her. Part of the cant of that book and that program was, the nation needs the women. We only have half the workforce. So what does she do while she's leaning in? Cambridge Analytica. That, if she had leaned out of Facebook, leaned into her house a little bit, or leaned into a smaller role, who knows? We might not have ended up in the situation we are. Just because you're a woman, who cares? And the other thing is, it's supposed to be important. This is why I really side with intersectionality, believe it or not. But this idea that it's really important for all women, for there to be more women investment bankers and more women who are at Bain Capital, or McKinsey, or the big consulting groups, that those are wins for women. I don't think anybody should work at McKinsey. I don't care. Investment banking, what have they ever done for me? I mean, I'm not a super wealthy person, but I'm like investing with them. So I just think we've gotten so far off track in this intellectual, the 60s, which gave birth to everything you and I live in our different generations. It was all about what's meaningful, what's deep, what's human, what's connected, what is love. And I grew up in Berkeley, and I it was kind of a mess. I knew a lot of kids who lived in communes. It doesn't really work very well, but
Yeah.
people were really grappling with that. And women really understood that children and being close to children was part of this idea of a life of profound meaning. And it wasn't stomping off to freaking corporate America to do nefarious things that are somehow good things because it's a woman.
Mm.
I don't believe it. And I think that being home with children has been really undervalued all the way through second wave feminism, to the point that they've just become, as I say, these just little sources of extra labor for the woman instead of a source of love. And love and labor are not there. Love's labor lost. You know,
Yeah.
it is labor, but it's love. So
Mm.
my brother-in-law always says, if a waitress hands you a sandwich, that's an act of commerce. If your mom hands you a sandwich, that's an act of love. And you
Mm.
can't put a price on that.
I've been really greedy with the question asking so far, so I'm going to go to the audience in a second. But while I still have you to myself, I wanted to ask you about the experience of being a cancer patient across time. Um, you are such an astute cultural observer, and you have passed through the kind of cancer industrial complex a few times now across 17 years. And I was wondering, can you tell us what's changed? Not just in the way that you navigate treatment, but also in the kind of larger sort of pink ribbon cultural edifice that exists around cancer.
Well, a lot of the things, I think we have a whole language around cancer and a belief system around cancer that can be really hard on us emotionally. We were talking yesterday about your family and this great fight and winning the fight. And we love to think of it as a fight, and the people around us are in the fight with us.
Hmm.
And then you're in the fight of your life. And then somehow, if the cancer recurs, did I not fight hard enough? Did I, was I too weak in the fight? Were there more? Was I could have fought in a stronger way? And um, and then I've had people have my name on, on their placards when they go on those runs and whatever. And I'm very grateful to them for thinking of me in that way. But this idea that and that thing always gets me, that all these healthy people are going to run and I can barely get out of bed. And I think it's just, if we can really reframe the way we think about it, and get rid of all the ribbons and everything. I can't laugh at them. They've raised a huge amount of money.
Sure.
And I guess a lot of women love to see them, and they love to get the little pink things. Once I went to treatment, this was my second time around, and they're like, oh, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We're going to give you this little gift. Oh, okay. What am I getting? A rape whistle, a pink rape whistle. So like, if you manage to get in here, okay, but to get your treatment, you could get raped on the way out. So here's your Susan G. Komen rape whistle. It's like, what other thing is going to happen to me as a woman? Like, this is just really a bad deal. I think if we could get more the idea that it's a disease that you take treatment for, and the treatment may succeed for you, the treatment may fail you, and if so, you'll take a different treatment, and it's not something you have to fight. It's not something you have to be strong about. It's not something you have to be right in the mind about. Think of it as, in a sense, it's a very large blown feeling of, you've got a bronchitis, they give you an antibiotic, it didn't work, they have to give you another one. You're not in the fight of your life, you're taking some medication. And I think the more that we can get out of this notion that we have to fight, we have to pray in a certain way, we have to visualize. Oh, they gave me all these books when I was first diagnosed 17 years ago, some famous guy, and it was all about visualization. And my sweet husband was just, anything. He'd try anything. And he's like, you have to do this. And chapter 3, it was like the guy was saying, and a group of women did this visualization to get larger breasts. And at the end of the summer, they had larger breasts. And I'm like, I don't think this guy is really on the up and up with this. So, I think the more that we can get away from the fighting and the running and fight of the life metaphor, the more we can let ourselves off the hook, that we don't have to think of ourselves as, and we don't, like with your mom, it's not like she lost her fight. It's that the medications failed her. They weren't there yet, that's what it was. And I think the more we can think that way, as opposed to if we get all this energy going, we can do something else. Well, then if it doesn't work, the people who run are going to think, should I have run farther or faster? So I
Yeah.
think we could talk about it and think about it in a whole different vocabulary that would be much better off for certainly patients and certainly young kids around them.
Hmm. That was a lovely answer. Michelle from from your own Los Angeles has a really good question. She asks, how can we best support our loved ones who are living with cancer during the pandemic, and how can we advocate for others? What do you wish your friends were doing if they're not running?
I'll give a risque answer at first,
Okay.
but when I first had cancer, and I was like, I had all the things I needed, but I was really, really down. And anyways, all my friends, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? What can I do for you? Casserole, pick up the kids, this or that. And I wanted to say to them, could you come over and give my husband a blowjob? That would really help. So there are things that would be helpful that I don't think you should ask for, pandemic or not.
I did not think you were going there. That's great.
But that, and certainly during a pandemic, I don't advise it. So I think that I always say to cancer patients, think if people are really willing to, they want to do things for you. Maybe not give a blowjob to your husband, but like they love you and they want to do something. And also, if you don't give them something specific to do, they love you enough that they're going to give you some other weird thing that you don't want, like some huge gift basket or something. So think about the things like just, the trash cans on, Wednesday, they come for the trash and they have to be rolled back. Do you think you could roll them back in?
Yeah.
Imagine if someone asked you to do that, you would be like, you'd feel so good about it because you'd know you were really helping someone. So I think it's for the patient to think of things that they can do. And certainly for the friends now to say, are there any kind of groceries that you really, how are your groceries doing? How's your cooking doing? If I drop you a meal, sometimes you just drop that meal off. And I remember once opening my door and I was in such a bad funk that day. This was originally. And Helene Ross, I opened my front door and she just left all this delicious chicken soup. And it had fresh dill in it. And she hadn't even rung the doorbell. It was there in a basket and it was so delicious. And so I just think finding food is so essential now. And then just other things, like, for example, driving. It's very hard. You have to drive yourself because you can't bring anyone in with you. And you can't, with the COVID. So just sort of say, what's going on with the driving? That's a big issue for cancer patients right now. If they don't have someone who's in quarantine with them to drive them, if they're not well enough to drive, they're going to have to take some risks to drive with someone they're not in quarantine with. So I think just asking about that and asking about treatment and the more that the one thing to just not say, and I say it about other things all the time, so I'm trying to monitor myself, don't tell a cancer patient you can't imagine what that would be like. It's like having cancer and getting chemo, it just suggests that I have been thrown into a realm that is beyond even imagination.
Yeah.
So that's something I've always noticed is don't say, I can't even imagine, like, oh my God, I'm really out of luck here. So
we've got time for one more, and it's a good one, and I think it's from Elise Mikinen, and it'll hit everyone sort of who's dealing with this pandemic and who has cancer. It's sort of a pan question. How are you coping with uncertainty at this time? I think all of us sort of feel a level of that, but you've experienced a much more profound version of it, not an unimaginable one, to your point, but just not knowing when or how this is going to end and feeling like you're stuck in this condition and you're playing a waiting game that could be indefinite. What are your coping mechanisms? Tell us.
Well, for me, it's just been time. I've, dealt with this for so long. I've been very close to death a few times. And so my whole life, in between cancer bouts and right now, I don't know, like I'm having a scan on the 27th. I don't know what it's going to reveal. It got pushed out a month because of the pandemic and wanting to keep people out of the hospital as much as possible. But the only things that work for that kind of anxiety is the more you can make your day. I think Ben Franklin talked about this, is an airtight compartment. The more you can just say, I have this day, I have these things to do, I got through the day, that is well done, nothing bad happened, I'm going to go to bed. Or that's the first thing. And then for suffering, and it sounds so trite, but I've had it told to me so many times, it's really the gratitude. It's really, if we walk around and just look at like any little thing, like I have a cup of water, it's right here, I'm thirsty. That's all that really matters right now, is I'm thirsty and I have some water. And so this 5-second block of time is okay. And you've just got to really, and it's like a practice that we've all, in this kind of percentage of like, magazine readers and writers, we've all been trying to do for years. So let's get mindful, it's just the moment. But the more you can say, the day is a contained thing, I'm going to have these things to do and I'm going to do them, and tomorrow is a different day and we'll see what comes then. That's the only way that I know. And right now we have all this uncertainty, but we're getting a lot more certainty. We're getting, every single day they're learning more. And my faith, even though this public messaging was terrible, my faith in the American scientists, American doctors, American researchers, and then that they're all around the world. Like I just always think with my cancer that I have this particular kind, it was this group of incredible scientists working on one problem.
Yeah.
Small number of scientists. Now we have all the scientists of the whole world. They're all working on one problem. And I think we're going to get solutions of some kind or another much faster than we think. And I think we're going to get through this. We're going to get back to, I don't believe these people that life is just over forever. There was polio and people had kids go out to play and never really come back the same person. And then there was a polio vaccine. And my mom said, my sister's older, my sister's actually born in the 50s. And my mom, who was a nurse, but who had grown up in New York and had friends who had gotten polio and died from polio and been permanently disabled by polio. She took my sister to get the polio vaccine, and she just almost started crying on the bus. She's like, my child's never going to have polio. Like, we don't think about polio, but the, science, Jonas Salk and the other guy that's in that, we're going to be helped by our scientists. I think it's going to be sooner than we think. We faced a lot worse than this. We're going to get through this one. That's my thought.
Well, Caitlin, this was great. Thank you for spending part of your day with me today and with our audience. And to our audience, we hope that you will visit theatlantic.com and subscribe to our journalism. We also hope that you'll join us for our next Big Story digital event in 2 weeks on May 28th, where The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, who's been texting us nonstop, will be here with executive editor Adrienne LaFrance, who's written a brilliant story on QAnon on the cover of our latest issue. We will send you more details via email, so stay tuned for that, and we will see you there. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Caitlin.